Hi.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Post St. Patrick's Day Thursday. I hope everyone's doing well tonight.
It is it is Justice League Day, and it's
Yes,
also at 3 in the morning, Falcon and
Falcon
Winter
and
Soldier Day. So
yes,
long
people
day.
long. It's gonna be a long day for those of us who it's our responsibility. With great responsibility comes a lot of viewing. For those of us that consider that responsibility, it is something we've had to put on the calendar. I, of course, have been gearing up with a couple. I don't know about you. I've been gearing up with a couple of my spoiler-free reviewers whose
Mhm.
opinions I respect, just to kind of see um, what their feelings are about what they've seen so far. And pretty much everything is aligning with. I feel like it's kind of getting back to the roots of Marvel with this show, and that's kind of what I'm expecting. As far as how it's going to, it's not going to be
Oh,
WandaVision. How
oh
we're
yeah,
going to see
okay.
this is going to
Yeah.
be classic. This is going to be classic style. Love it or hate it. There are some things with like the bang zoom
I
pow that
I
we've come to expect, but
yeah.
that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, so what I think is I think this is going to be more for that casual fan who only knows the movies and only really cares about the movies.
Yes.
And that's okay because like it was a very slow burn for them. If you
Well,
didn't have any Wanda or Vision history or
yeah.
like if you didn't know the comics and you didn't see the little Easter eggs and every bit of care that was put into everything, as much as the story is amazing in WandaVision, but it's just like that slow burn in the beginning. It
Hmm.
it felt like a chore for a lot more of the only MCU fans who don't want to hear about the comic history and tell people like
Or
me
even
that I'm going over their heads and I'm too smart for them and I need to basically shut up because I'm making them feel insecure when that's never what I was trying to do, or and I don't think that I was.
I
But
no, but
so
I'm not going to dumb myself down for anyone. So
yeah,
there
so
you go.
that's why
It's
it's like this is going to be more for those people, and that's okay.
That's
And
okay.
that's
That's
I
the
think
type
that
of story
that's
that it is. Yeah,
well, it's also that's the type of story Captain America is. My
right.
only issue is like I've had somebody legitimately say, "Well, Captain America in the comics is boring," and I'm like, "No, because they ripped those storylines straight out of the
Yeah, no,
comics."
that's the movies aren't like kind of out of nowhere. They
Yeah,
really do come from
yeah, like no,
that.
he's always been that way. You're
Yeah.
thinking of Ultimate Captain America from the Ultimate Universe, and yes, he's horrible. We don't talk about him. But
Well,
616 Steve is great, and 616 Bucky is actually this is probably a slight bit better Bucky in origin, at
mhm.
least. And
Certainly seems less
and
forced
Sam,
than it did at times
yeah,
in the comic books.
and
Yeah.
Sam feels more grounded and not just that everyman that was in the background in the beginning. So of his time. So like we're getting really good situations. It's just this is already expected to be vastly different than the comics. It's going to be strictly MCU based, and I think that this is going to be much more for those fans who felt a little lost in WandaVision.
Yeah,
And then
and it's well, and no, go ahead.
no,
Finish, Pamela. I'm
I
sorry.
was just gonna say like we'll get more of the zany crazy stuff again with Loki.
Yeah,
So
DB Cooper. I love
yeah,
that. Um, yeah, no, certainly with Loki. It's interesting that they so I understand why I don't think it really mattered at the end of the day which of the shows was originally intended to come out first. That's
mm-hmm.
not They're not really related to each other like that, so that's totally fine. With WandaVision coming out, so much anticipation because pandemic. It's been a while since the movie Endgame.
Yeah.
Yes, there's going to be a lot of anticipation for whatever. But I don't know about you. No, I do, because these are the same comments that you had. Even though this is a storyline that we're familiar with, even though there are, again, for me, I still think the biggest accomplishment was simply creating the Scarlet Witch
Oh
at
yeah.
the end of WandaVision. It's also, um, as somebody who likes TV, as somebody who likes good storytelling, it's just a good show.
No, it
Like
is.
there's just a lot that's great about it, whatever it was going to be
Well,
about at the end of the day.
it is, but at the same time, it's to me, it's WandaVision's more of a thinking piece. And sometimes when people want to watch TV and they kind of got used to it, especially with Infinity War and Endgame, they didn't have to think too much. You just get to watch it because there was a lot of action and there was a lot of just like fantasy
They're
elements.
popcorn movies. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I think people were expecting with WandaVision. And so that's why there was a little of that struggle bus during the first 3 episodes for some people. Obviously not us and not for me.
Because I'm like,
and, yeah, no, like, but that's because like we wanted a story, and so this is the story we're getting. I'm not fully I expect it to be a good story here.
So talented.
No, exactly. And while I'm expecting Falcon and Winter Soldier to have a good story, I'm not expecting it to be the same kind of storytelling. It's going to feature much more like a spy movie or a spy series with a lot more action and just kind of that more like act 1, act 2, just more for people to turn their brains off.
Sure. The same reason I still watch The Simpsons. Brain off.
Yeah.
But you're also looking at something that's such a character-driven show, and now we're looking at something that's going to be definitely more plot-driven show that happens to have very well-constructed characters in it. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I mean, just the jaw-dropping perfection of, for me, the actors that they had in WandaVision is something that carried me through so much of it. How could this possibly be boring? I'm watching so much happening. Like you have to go back and watch a second time because it was perfect. Like it was perfect. There's some of the best acting, some of the best performances that we've seen this year. If not years that we've seen.
I fully agree with that. And like I said, these are going to be different performances. I still expect the same intensity, but it's a different story. It was written by a different team. It's going to be focusing on different things. I know that they're going to focus more on Baron Zemo, and that's going to be great for the fans of Baron Zemo. But it's going to be like reading a different book because that's what it is. It's a different book. It's a different time. And
again, and this underestimation of what, and as you said before, that piece, like, well, Captain America's this. No. This still all comes from a very deep part of comic book history. This all still comes from and again, 99% of people out there are Bill Maher. They think that if you read comic books, it's because you're too dumb to read a real book. But period. And it's not like they've ever picked up a comic book or they would know. That's just what they believe. So then they're so impressed with wonderful moments and wonderful characters, and that a show does really well, and like, oh, where did this come from? Wow, they had some really good writers on this. This is a really creative story. Why can't comic books be like this?
When they've been like that the whole time. In fact, actually, like especially with WandaVision, was every single bit and piece, and even things that you didn't at first realize because it did have an MCU spin on it. Everything came out of a comic. Everything, like down to certain aesthetics in the neighborhood, came down to a comic aesthetic. It came down to like the
those
different
commercials
eras.
Are brilliant.
Yeah, the different eras, all focused on different eras that that Scarlet Witch and Vision have been together. Pretty much.
This is how long comics have been around. This is how long these stories have been around.
And focusing on the pregnancy, which when both of them first came on, no one thought that would have ever even been possible. And just in this kind of format, the way they handled it, yes, you had to think about it, and I'm glad that they made us think about it each week because of the fact that so much of the history, while it had that MCU spin and it was woven in, and they had all these different elements that made it its own for that world, that 199999999 that it is, it still had so much roots and basis and influence from the 616 storylines. And it's not Ultimate. I love how everyone always loves to go, no, it's based in Ultimate. No, your Fox movies were based in Ultimate. Some
Agreed.
Amazing Spider-Man by Mark Webb was based in Ultimate. This is very much like, the thing is, people forget Feige really likes to base things out of either very new comics or from the 70s and 80s, which is probably the time he was reading it. Well, it's not even necessarily original because it's kind of when they, I would say
the heyday. It's like
the more silver, quote unquote, silver era. Little
only
bit
some of the characters were original. Yeah,
a little bit into that dark era, but he doesn't like super go into things without, like, maybe it's a little bit of the 90s, or but the way it's all handled and the vision that he seems to have doesn't seem to be focused on that one stupid Ultimates line that I think honestly derailed the comics industry, period, because then everyone started to try and go after it because, yes, Bendis has a cult following and was largely a part of that Ultimate universe. However, no one really uses it anymore, and yet everyone keeps saying that it's a thing, and it's just like the best thing that came out of it was Miles, and that was way later after it had basically already ended. Let it go.
Like, it really seems more like when they approach a character, when they approach the character art. What I'm imagining is like the room full of Post-it notes of all of the details you could ever pull up of every publication, of every storyline everyone has ever created, and they go through and they find the line that works the best.
Yeah,
that's what I'm picturing. Is that it's not, if you could pick apart a lot of the DC movies and say that this director was clearly greatly influenced by Year One. It was clearly greatly influenced by this. Yeah, and that's it. Well, and with these ones, it's like I'm looking at a whole room of Post-it notes, is what I'm imagining that they do.
Basically, and I also think, though, too, that's also just the way Marvel and DC work. They work differently. They always have. DC always has very set eras because they kind of always reboot their worlds a little bit depending on the era. Because even now, like what I grew up reading, that's not the same Batman. That's not they are not even different. It's in a completely different world. Versus Marvel, everything is always, as much as there's multiple worlds, and you can pick and choose which one you want to go into, the main 616 storyline, everything is like on a sliding time scale, and everything is all together. And what might have been written in the 60s, and is 50 years old, or more,
it's still canon.
For Iron Man, it's only like maybe 10 years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's
and this part of this, I think, is the product of how the same product that led to how much longer it took for us to get Marvel characters into media, because you're dealing with characters that required a lot more special effects. Like these movies could not have been made at the same time we were making the first Superman movies, first Superman TV shows, the first Batman shows. You're dealing with media that has been around for decades longer when it comes to DC. Because of that mainstream popularity, what is DC constantly trying to do? Well, people like this, so this is what our comic books are going to be now.
Yeah.
People like this. So you have decades more of influence from what the publisher believed was going to sell. Like they're still trying to insert what's in their cinematic universe into comic books.
Yes.
It's doing this.
Well, it's
compared to when they did the animated series came out, they just gave it its own comic book.
Well, yeah, and that was something different.
It was its own thing.
Well, and that was something different for DC too. But DC,
so that's what I'm talking about DC. I'm talking about.
Well, DC. I know. That's what I'm. Yeah. Yes, and so like the thing is yes, Superman and Batman have had movie serials since the 1940s, which was only about around a good maybe 8 years since the comics had been out. But Marvel also had that too. The thing is Marvel was Atlas Comics during that time. They focused on different things than superheroes. Once they started focusing on the superhero game, that's kind of what started their beef in the first place. But it's a really friendly beef. But the thing is ultimately it's the way the heroes connect to the audience, and it's how the writers connect to the characters in other media that kind of makes it or breaks it. That's the thing is, like, I think DC Comics has always been kind of weird about how their media is portrayed, which is funny because they were the first to branch out with their IPs. But Marvel has always taken this approach of, you go ahead with it, you have fun with it, you do what you want to do, we're here to support you, have fun. Because they didn't care. It made them money. Great. DC was always like, no, everything has to be XYZ, 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 according to the times and what they felt was appropriate. And because of that hesitation, it's been kind of crazy. Because you can even talk to Bruce Timm and Paul Dini about their times on the cartoon. They constantly, like, they had more fights with DC Comics than they did with Fox Kids or WB.
Because when it came to standards and practices compared to embargoes on characters and what the character could, or how far they could go,
and who they could use, who they couldn't. I mean, the Vampira, not horror, like real life Vampira, but the Vampira comic character from DC.
Right.
Bruce Timm, because it's Bruce Timm, really thought, it was totally appropriate to put her in a cartoon. Now, it could have worked, don't get me wrong, but
they made a lot of other stuff work. I wouldn't have doubted it.
I mean, but DC Comics was like, what you doing? No. Which is now funny because now I think he could probably just do anything with the animation line, and they'd be like, yeah, sure, do it. Because what the heck is the Killing Joke? Or Harley and Batman.
Harley Quinn Batman.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, I can't eat a yam without thinking of that stupid scene. And it's so wrong. Like, it did Ivy dirty. And I'm sorry, but mystical magical yams that get you high enough to see the Swamp Thing. That's literally a part of that movie. After Harley and Nightwing. Like, what in the world? But all right. But see that's also a testament to DC, which is now, of course, WB. They are completely lost on what to do, and I don't get
totally different teams now. Totally different. Yeah, it feels totally different teams now.
But they're completely. The thing is like, they let Tim Burton kind of do what he wanted, and it was brilliant. But then they really kind of wouldn't let Schumacher do quite exactly what he wanted, which, of course, maybe that shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Right.
That might have been needed. Because what he did get away with is crazy. But that wasn't appropriate. Like, that kind of hindered those movies. They let Christian Bale, or not Christian Bale, but Nolan. They let Christopher Nolan do what he wanted to do. And while I disagree with the end of the trilogy, because I don't think that that's very Bruce Wayne, that seemed to work out great. But then WB didn't really let Snyder do what he wanted to do. And look at how that turned out. And now they kind of had to go back and spend all this money to say, hey, here's this 4-hour edit, which now everyone's loving, because, like, the audience, Rotten Tomatoes is at 97%. I think the critics is 76. Last time I checked it. Even though it is 4 hours long, it is kind of broken up segment wise in the movie, so it's easy to place pause, go in. It's very linear. From what I understand, I have not watched it yet, but like, to see what was on the cutting room floor from Whedon and Jeff Johns seems to be a travesty, because Twitter is all for canceling them both, which, if they didn't think they were already canceled before,
Well, and with Jeff Johns, I never understood, and this is a couple decades now of him being that guy that was the go-to guy for the meet. I know I'm like, but he keeps messing up.
Well, I mean, the Smallville situation was that was bungled completely, and I totally get it. Like they should have. I still think that they should have been able to use Batman in Smallville. I don't think not having Bruce in Smallville, I think was a disservice to that later half.
Right, and I've still read 3 different versions of what that embargo was. I'm still not getting the full story of what that embargo. I got the embargo, but I'm like,
yeah, no, I fully believe that it was just Jeff Johns pissed somebody off, more than likely, because there's a reason they kind of pushed him into that, and then was like, no, dude, you stay over there. We'll continue the comics. You stay over there. Just stay.
Well, and then the movies. So here's the TV show. So here's the TV shows because Lois and Clark was so good for us. So here's another TV show, and then we're gonna do the movies over here, and we're gonna do the comics over here, and you're gonna do this over here, and then somebody gets a bug up their butt because something does really well. Something's getting a lot of attention. Somewhere the fans are talking about one thing more than the other, and now it's like, well, okay, so now what are we gonna do?
Well, I mean, in fairness with Smallville, I mean, there was a legitimate sex cult running through their staff, and they never knew.
How you never know, but that's okay.
It was like your 2 biggest female stars are in a drama with it.
Problemed? Yes. Yes.
But all right. I'm honestly shocked Jeff Johns wasn't a part of it.
No, no, yeah.
I'm like, honestly,
hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about it. I thought about more of like him just being neglectful and distracted and irresponsible and undeserving of the position he was in. But that's just not really noticing that.
No, my thing is that's how he acts. But there's certain things that have been said between that set and the Justice League set that kind of makes me feel like he would have been one of those insecure people that would have totally joined up to make himself feel bigger than he is.
Ah, got it. Gotcha.
Yeah, not necessarily saying that he would have wound up in the bad part of it, but because it was a Scientology-like cult.
It's like that. Yeah. No, it's exactly. Yes.
So that's why it's like, no, he would have been on the other side because, the head of that Nexium did not really focus on men, but he still probably would have been that person spending a crap ton of money to become powerful. That's how I feel Jeff Johns is.
I cannot disagree with the moments of desperation that seem to roll off of him. Yes.
Yeah. So yes, that's my interpretation. But again, we are seeing DC sort of be slightly redeemed. Now the big thing is, of course, I can't remember if it was earlier today or yesterday, but Johnny Depp has filed another lawsuit against Amber Heard because, how she promised in her divorce,
the money,
divorce agreement that she would give all $7 million from the agreement to a children's charity, to a children's hospital. She gave them the very first payment in 2016, 2017, and never paid them again. And then
I do remember them making that statement. Yeah, I do remember them making a public statement.
Yeah, and then her attorney during the last lawsuit said that she had finished paying them in 2018. Well, Johnny Depp's lawyers, of course, realized that that's not true. So now she's being taken to court again for basically breaching her agreement. And, that's where we start getting the rumors that she might have actually been fired from Aquaman 2. But we have not heard that, this has not been
no confirmation
reported. Yeah, it's not confirmed. I kind of hope she is, because I've literally seen way too many things, not just my own opinions. This is a large part of it on social media. No one's going to see Aquaman 2 if she's in it.
But this would be an easy out. You didn't give the money to the children's hospital. Okay, now you're out of the movie.
Exactly. I mean,
Now
they
you're
did
out.
it. They did it for less for Johnny because essentially the last judge on their last lawsuit basically just said,
Oh,
okay, both of
I heard that was
both of
rulings.
y'all, yeah, it was basically like, look, both of y'all threw hands, so we're
Yeah.
done. And that was because both of them had admitted to throwing hands at each other. So then that's when he was like, all right, y'all are done. And now this is the new lawsuit because technically, look, after that judgment where they then kicked Johnny Depp off of the J.K. Rowling train, which I honestly think
Right.
is great for him because
At this point, yes.
man, that's another situation. But they should have also done the same to Amber. I think that that would have been fair, and yet they did not do that.
Right,
And so
because
now
the ruling was you both. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, both
and
dramatic.
basically, yeah. And so, because the thing is ultimately it is messy. I mean, domestic abuse is going to be messy, especially domestic abuse with a female perpetrator to a male, because it will always. Unfortunately, our justice system in those scenarios, especially with large amounts of money involved, is going to be skewed slightly towards the female in this situation. And I don't say that lightly because obviously I've been in it. Like I am basically a domestic abuse survivor from a bad relationship. I think we've all been there and dealt with it. A lot of times it is like the woman is the victim, but it can happen to both genders.
Yes.
And
yes.
and it needs to be very fair. And the thing is that long-term domestic violence can be messy. And
yes. And as as you said, the judge pointed out, and this becomes damaging when you already have an uphill battle. I give credit to Johnny Depp's public statements about this. He states it very factually. He takes responsibility for he says it the right way. He doesn't. It has nothing to do with like could have left, should have left, would have left. And it wasn't about that. It's not about that. It's a relationship, and we don't know what happens behind closed doors until we do know what happens behind closed doors. And abuse is abuse. And what he wanted, to make his position clear, to make the context of these physical altercations clear. Also important for all the witnesses that came forward and were like, dude, she was on him all the time. She did this all the time. Like we saw her do this all the time. Two people who should not have gotten married. No. Not the most responsible decision either of them made. Not the most responsible decision. It basically entered a point in his life where he wanted less responsibility. He's been a father and a married man and a hard worker for decades. And here comes a girl who's not going to get mad about you coming home drunk because she's at the party with you. How fun does that sound? Well, not that fun when it turns into an incredibly toxic, triggering, I no longer have control over my own substance abuse situation. And now I'm in a relationship with a person who can't control themselves physically. And now you have multiple volatile situations that you have to go into great detail for people to understand the whole dynamic of this relationship. And I give him credit for being as honest as he's been. This is not easy to talk about. It by any means. And he's a father. He's got kids. He's got, everything behind him. And this can't be easy on that sense. And as you said, as the man in the relationship. Fortunately, so much evidence has come out. But to your point, when the judge says, like, both of y'all. Well, okay, then that means both of them.
Well, I mean, he basically just dismissed it. Like, technically, the original court thing at hand did kind of wind up going back as a win towards Amber Heard's camp, but technically it wasn't a win as much as it was
right. Because he didn't win. That was the problem. Was because Johnny didn't win. It became kind of this by default win for Amber.
Yeah.
Right. Plus she was still in her movies. Plus she still has like her she has a couple sponsorships she's still doing. She has all of this stuff, and it's like if she was the dude, she wouldn't have any of this stuff.
No, and also, I mean, no matter what, she's exactly, and that was also another, like, I saw something on YouTube where they were because some people are comparing Armie Hammer's situation to Marilyn Manson's, and while both of them are wrong, there are clear differences between what Armie Hammer was doing and what Marilyn Manson was doing. Armie Hammer is that gray area of, I think he took his
too far.
BDSM situation a little too far. Versus,
he should have been seeking help. Yeah, he should have been seeking help for how far it was getting.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus Marilyn Manson is a psychopath and has a history of doing this and grooming younger girls. And he hides behind but I'm alternative and I'm into this stuff. But what he's doing is not that, because there is no consent involved at any point in time.
Not when you're no, that was clearly taking advantage. That was clearly doing what you wanted to do. And again, that argument of, well,
it's a power situation.
It was a power situation, and this is there are other people in Hollywood who have gotten away with it based on the argument. Well, his current wife says that she didn't do that. Well, yeah, but you also have exes of Marilyn saying, no, my relationship wasn't like that. That doesn't mean I'm saying she's a liar. I'm saying my dynamic with him was different.
Well, the only one that I feel like has enough to back that up, where it's like, okay, maybe we can understand, yeah, he didn't do that with Rose McGowan, is because she never backtracked. However, Dita has backtracked multiple times. Her latest statement makes no sense compared to everything that she was saying in offhand in interviews.
Okay.
Right before she got divorced and right when she got divorced. She said that she had PTSD then. I do believe she does. I think ultimately what she was writing was just because she wants to step as far away as possible from the situation.
Yeah.
And she seems to be kind of scared of whatever
it's a bit unfair.
Has on her. Yeah.
It could have on her. He could have photos. He could have videos. He could have statements from her. We don't know what they've had in a situation like that. He could have done anything he wanted.
Yeah.
And this is why it's unfair to keep demanding of other women. Well, what do you say about this? What are you going to do about this? Where's your public statement? They may not be ready to talk about that. Same thing with Sarah Michelle Gellar and Joss Whedon. If something bad happens, she may not be ready to talk about it. And that's fine. It's
their personal thing. If they've wound up figuring out a way that has worked for them to move on, or, regardless of if it's something small that happened or something life-changing that happened, if they've worked out a way to move on, they don't want to get dragged back in. And the thing is,
it could be a trigger for them. Yeah.
It could be a trigger. It also could completely uproot everything that they've done by just having to unpack it all. And it's sometimes a lot easier just to keep things locked away, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, I know that sounds very pessimistic, but the thing is I know I've been in my situation and I did try to, get help, and I was definitely shunned away from the prop community here in Atlanta. And, I definitely got victim blamed and everything got twisted. And I kind of had to work my own way out of that and move on. And it's like, I can't just come back and constantly keep pushing, nor can I, just, if something was to happen, I don't know if I should be involved because of everything that was done to me might discredit them too. You never quite know everything that goes into it. And so it's kind of like sometimes it might be a lot easier, if things aren't so cut and dry, to keep your mouth shut. But I do applaud people for at least speaking out and saying I'm in support of them. Mm-hmm. Regardless of saying, oh, but it didn't happen to me, but I'm in support. That's kind of, because I think it's like Sarah Michelle Gellar's statement.
Yeah.
Was very vague. However, then Michelle Trachtenberg came in and was like, yeah, exactly this. And then kept going and going and going, because clearly it's still on her mind. It's something she can't get away from. Right. And I think that opened the floodgates for her. Obviously, she's still not going to speak about her experience. We still don't know exactly what happened, other than there was a rule on set that he wasn't allowed to be near her without another supervisor.
Which should have been the case anyway. Sorry, just saying.
Well, it should have been, but you know what I mean? So something
Yes.
was very wrong there, regardless.
Enough that it created a policy. Yeah.
And enough that it caused that kind of reaction where it felt very much like almost mouth vomit because she kept coming back, I think, 3 different times and adding on to it.
Mm.
Where versus it was originally just a repost saying, this is also my statement.
Right.
And that's kind of the two, like, that's, people process things differently. People move on differently. And it is never just a linear progression anyway. But something like this can cause a trigger, and they act the way Michelle acted could cause a trigger, and it acts the way that Sarah reacted, or could just ignore it all, like Allison Hannigan.
Yep.
Who I really want to hear from personally, because she was apparently the token, golden child for Joss Whedon. So why is she staying quiet? But the thing is that it's her personal business, and if she's not ready to speak it, she shouldn't have to.
Yes.
But it's very weird. You know what I mean? Like it's something that
it's still going to be on your mind.
Yeah.
Right. It's still, your curiosity is still going to be there because clearly these people were there, and we as human beings feel like we're getting, the bad word for it, but tease, we're kind of getting like the fringe of it. Like we're getting a little bit of it. It's like, whoa, wait, I want to know more. Yes. But the demanding of it, or the even talking, again, the bombarding of people who could have also been victimized in the situation with, well, where's your statement? Where's your this? It's always come off as a bit aggressive for me. Like, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what this is doing for them. And
you also don't know if there's a private settlement either.
Oh, they're usually, yeah, those NDAs are awful fun.
Yeah, because Rose McGowan technically broke her NDA against Weinstein.
Yep.
To speak out against it, because technically she actually did win in court and won a settlement, which should have counted. However, the way his lawyers handled it was to seal everything up.
Yes, slap that gag order on it.
Yeah,
they it gets tricky because if the name comes out for some other reason, if there's another, like, I'm just simply making or I'm saying the secretary, and at a certain point somebody's not going to try and enforce an NDA, like when you no longer work for the company.
Yeah,
nobody at the former Weinstein company is going to go after any woman who had the NDA and did, just like Fox News had to back off a bunch of women who broke their NDAs.
Yeah, technically NDAs do not prevent you
or gag orders.
Or gag orders prevent you from speaking out against a crime. It's not supposed to. It's actually if I'm not mistaken, it actually winds up breaking a law, and it is null and void if that's what it's set up to do. However, in Hollywood and in other places, it's everywhere. Most people feel like they have to stay quiet because they signed something that says so, because they can be sued civilly for breaking it. But if it's criminal, you're supposed to break it. Like, that's because you have to. Just from a moral standpoint, yeah.
Yes. What they hope is that people stay quiet long enough that basically the statute of limitations runs out, that you're not in a position to get it in front of a judge and get it ruled as illegal. You can't do it. It's like, paperwork. Hate it, all of it. Kind of the same with the non-competes. Every time I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember if this is because it actually breaks federal law or if because there's a law in the books that makes non-competes null and void in California. But at some point, it is illegal for a former employer or a current employer who wants you to be there to make you sign a non-compete, which is kind of the same idea. It's barring you from, again, and it becomes illegal for them to do that. They cannot interfere with your prosperity or whatever the ruling was that made them null and void.
Yeah, and this is why most tech companies move to Georgia, where there are no laws against that.
Right to work. You wanted right to work. Congratulations, you got it.
Yep. Right to fire.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't call it right to work. Right to fire.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
So, but yeah, so I mean, I don't like, the whole thing with Hollywood is very sexist and weird and horrific.
Power dynamics. Yeah, you're dealing, and it's anytime I get asked that question, multiple panels about women in the industry, you've probably gotten exactly the same ones. First, it was hilarious. I was at one panel. I was in the audience, and Alec and 6 other middle-aged white men were all on the stage. And I think they were talking about fan films or something specific in fan films. And one of the girls came out. She's like, "Can we just point out that you're all middle-aged white men?" And the guys were like, wait. And Alec's like, my girlfriend's in the audience. She'll come up. And I'm like, don't you do that? Too late, you guys. I got called out. And I said, I got up there and I basically made the statement defending the guys because I knew these guys. I'm like, these are not the guys you need to worry about. There's nobody up in a treehouse holding a sign that says no girls allowed. This is a product of an industry that has more than 100 years of a very specific power dynamic. And that is a very hard cycle to break. It's just the way I hate saying this, like the way things have been done tend to be the way things keep going until there's a huge shakeup, until something big happens, until there are consequences. It doesn't have to do with women not being involved in the industry or not being good enough for it. You're dealing with a power dynamic. Why is there so much rampant misogyny? Why is there so much rampant sexual abuse? Why are so many women victimized? It's the industry. It's a power dynamic in the industry that creates victims. Just like anywhere else where the power dynamic is shifted too far on one side or the other. So this is everything that people are talking about trying to shift. And this is basically how I try to clarify. It's not about the industry saying like all men in the industry are bad. This is not about men versus women. This is simply a product of history.
I mean, yeah, but also in that regard, though, because that's also another topic that has been going around due to the slaying in England. I think I know her first name was Sarah. I cannot remember her last name. But a woman was killed because she was walking home from a friend's house. And I know that they caught the guy and everything like that. But there was a larger issue, the fact that the police, when they were out looking for her, told female neighbors to stay inside and that it was not safe to go out, because I think this was also, they found out this was either an ex-officer or he was an officer. Like, it's a whole thing over on the other side of the pond, and I'm sure more people know way more about it than I do. But it's brought up the conversation about not all men, but it's like, but the thing is the issue is, like, we know it's not all men.
Right.
But how are we supposed to know what kind of man you are? Because they look after each other and they don't look after the women. And that's the thing, is that you need accountability and you need to be able to call this behavior and this systematic sexism out to keep others safe.
This is not me saying that the product of history was right or wrong. This is me simply saying that you have an industry where good men work alongside bad men, and everybody, there's a combination of acceptance, there's a combination of bro, there's a combination of this is how you're going to become successful in the industry. Like, all of these attitudes allowed to perpetuate
but that's the
because
thing.
of this.
But then that's the thing on where, we say all men, because if I say all men are trash, I will get banned off Facebook for 3 days. But someone can then say how, like a few years ago, as an example, that I will be, they can't wait until Trump was going to completely overrule everything and women had to be forced back in the kitchen because they were going to rape me to prove a point that in Trump's country, men can do whatever they want and women have to just deal with it. And that didn't violate guidelines at all.
Yes.
Again, that's the
society of double standards.
People seem to think, because of quote unquote years and years and years and years and years of misguided thinking that literally come from a power play. In general, that's the whole point of the misogyny, was just men needed to feel superior, and it got written into doctrinizations and laws from a very, very young age, and that's why females were treated like property back then for no good reason, because that shouldn't have been. But anyway, but the
lots of things.
But the thing is that, again, you can't get mad when we say all men are trash, because how is one person, how am I supposed to know off the street who's the quote unquote good guy and who is, you know, and who is the person that's going to hurt me?
Well,
I do not
yes.
know. So
Yes,
therefore,
and
I need to treat
yeah.
you all as bad until you prove that you are good. And the only way to prove that and to make people trust again, just as a whole situation, is accountability. Calling people out when you see
Yes.
the behavior, stopping the behavior yourself. Like it's
Well,
not,
yes.
and it's not just good enough for you to say, well, I would never do that. I was raised right. Okay, but your friend might not have been, and your
Yes.
friend's doing bad things, and you're going to sit there and protect them.
And that was the accountability
Why?
that these women in the audience wanted, just in this one moment, to show that you guys passively created a group amongst yourselves, and you all work together, and you're always together. You passively, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, passively created a group where there's no female representation. And this audience just called you out for that.
Yeah.
And that's a lesser offense, but it is something else that is getting called out.
And well, it needs to. I mean, it's still it's a byproduct of this situation. And I want to call out Jim right now, because look, you can sit there and go, well, it's guilty to prove an innocent, and you know that's wrong. No, sir. Because when I wind up getting assaulted, just because they know that they can overpower me and they want to have that power play, they want to feel powerful and they want to do that. No, that changes you. Period. And then when you see them get away with it, it means everyone else can get away with it.
So again,
no.
Yeah, like you have a common feeling for women that we have to err on the side of caution, trying to explain to people that, you know, why are you always so worried? Why are you so stressed? Why are you so emotional? Why are you so this? I said, I've been groomed my entire life to understand that if I let my guard down, I could get killed. I have to be here. I lived in New York City for 7 years. Anybody who's been in a bad situation, anybody's been through this, like this creates this feeling that Kelly is describing of, I need to err at best, and the most calm way I could say it is err on the side of caution. I have to take a step back. I have to think about, how am I going to get home? How much am I going to drink? What am I going to do? You know, if somebody does this to me, am I going to make friends with the bartender? Where am I going to sit where I can be seen? Whenever I go out, guys don't need to think about that when they go to a bar. They could literally stumble down the road and they'll be fine. I can't do that. There are things that we as women have to think about, and other people who are marginalized and easily victimized in this society have to think about, that most men, we have to explain to you, is basically what we're trying to say. This is why we explain. This is why we do things the way that we do them. And this is why, again, easiest way to say is err on the side of caution, but it's often a more extreme feeling than that. And that's especially prevalent in this industry. I walked away from the entertainment industry, looking back, you know, having panic attacks because I could not take one more stupid invitation to drinks after an audition. I couldn't do it. I couldn't take the letdown again. So that was me. Oops, I lost her mic. Lissa, can you? Oh, Kelly, you pushed your mic off. There you go. Whoop. Oh, there we go.
No, it muted me because something happened. My laptop is about to die, so I was actually chatting in the private chat that we probably needed to wrap it up. That, and just, I'm not gonna have the rest of this conversation with Jim. At this point, he's kind of proven to me that he's not a safe person to be around. I'm sorry, but he needs to look at what because he just said that, you know, I've been in bad situations before too, but nobody ever listened to me because I'm a man. We literally just had a conversation where I said it happens to all genders, and that we should believe all genders, and I was mad.
Yeah. Yep. I think I agree. I think that's a good place for that to well, I hope everyone is ready. It was a serious conversation. By all means, feel free to I don't talk amongst yourselves, but obviously we want everyone to feel like they can speak their piece, but that means that people are going to speak their piece as well about what you have to say, and that's perfectly okay. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you everyone And it's, again, super busy. Happy Snyder Cut Day. Falcon and Winter Soldier after that. We'll be back on Sunday to discuss all of that. We'll try to keep it moving along with questions and comments and anything else you guys will have. Yep.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go. There, just so I let them know we wrapped up our comment section, but we wanted to wish everyone a happy Snyder Cut Day, and we want to Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then we're hoping Kelly will be able to join us soon. I know she's not usually scheduled Sunday, but we're certainly going to get all of the fun facts and opinions and in-depth insight from Kelly as well as Lissa about everything coming up this week. But I want to thank everybody again for joining us, and Kelly, thank you for taking the time today, all of the wonderful insight. And Lissa, thanks for being that behind the board for us. I think that's it.
All right.